Hello everyone and welcome back to Let's Play Pokemon Alpha Sapphire. In the last part, we took care of our dad Norman back here in Petalburg City, and ended up getting the HM for Surf along the way as well. So before we actively continue on with the plot, which we will be doing later this part, I'm taking a look around all the routes we can now access with Surf. We started off with the northwestern part of Hoenn doing that last time, but now we're going to take a look at the routes over near Dewford we couldn't really explore because, well, we didn't have Surf at that point. With that said, that does mean the first 15 to 20 minutes of this part in specific is just a lot of us going through areas we've technically been to before, just not in depth. And even then, in some of them, there's places we actively can't reach yet for reasons we'll go into later in the LP, which at this point, given what I know the later footage is, I have to imagine this will be slightly shorter than Soul Silver, but only just. And for all I know, I could be wrong about that. Petalburg City actually has a lot of items you couldn't reach on the first go-around because they were on little distant beaches like that. And in that regard, they're probably some of the longest-lasting items to taunt you across the game, because if you notice them across the way, especially in like the GBA version, there's not really much you can do about that until this point as it is. Compare that to even other Pokemon games, and they usually will give you access to things like that pretty quickly. Oh, did Dad give you that badge? Did you hear something from your mom? For coming back home to Little Rune and talking to your mother after getting the 5th gym badge, you actively get the amulet coin from her, which is a held item that you give to the first party slot in your Pokemon team, and it'll double any prize money you get from trainer battles. With that said, while it's the same effect as the luck incense we got earlier in the LP, they do not stack. But it can stack with the attack payday and any money you get from that, or the prize money O-power you can get in the game. Because I believe the way it works is that those add on to the end of battle score for your cash, and then the amulet coin doubles that overall. Also, while we're here in town, I figured I might as well show my Pokedex to Professor Birdin and get his thoughts on it. Though worth noting, I believe both in the original Hoenn as well as here in Omega Ruby Alpha Sapphire, there's nothing like there was back in Kanto where you got certain rewards by talking to certain aides, by having a certain amount of Pokemon in your Pokedex listed. That's largely just a thing they did in Gen 1, and maybe they did it in Gen 2 off the top of my head. Future me, correct me if I'm wrong about any other future generations having that, but if memory serves, that's mostly just a Kanto thing. With that said, time for the bulk of what today is going to be checking out the water routes that connect Petalburg all the way over to Slateport. Worth noting, though, we saw that Wally automatically just brought us over to Mauville last time. This chunk of the game in the original Gen 3 is where you meant to use the body of water over Route 103 to actively reach Mauville a bit faster from Petalburg, but they just give you the outright shortcut here, and you're forced into it, which is kind of weird in retrospect. Either way, time for our first new Pokemon of the part. This is Spheal, an ice-water type, meaning it's weak to fighting, rock, grass, and electric. Spheal has some okay HP, but as you take it along its evolutionary line, you get a pretty good HP-based tank with no real bad stats, but no real super standout ones on top of that. In my memory, though, it does have some pretty good learn sets, so this is ultimately a pretty good ice or water type if you wanted to have one of those types on your team. I've used it serviceably before, it's just not my go-to for water specifically because, well, that's what my favorite Pokemon's for. Spheal's definitely a line, though, where I think its base ability is its best one, because it can get Oblivious for one thing, which prevents the Infatuation status ailment. It can get Ice Body, which if there's a hail-based weather state in the active battlefield, it'll regain HP from that rather than taking damage. But my favorite one that it gets is its base one, Thick Fat, where it takes half damage from any ice or fire type moves to begin with, which honestly goes real good with its resistances as it is. I happen to really like Thick Fat on that Pokemon type. Also, during that next trainer battle that I ended up cutting out because there was nothing new in it, we finally got Boomba up to a slacking. We're doing pretty good on how our team's looking right now. A lot of the Pokemon trainers you see during water routes tend to have about the same Pokemon in every game. You're going to be seeing a lot of the base water type of that generation, as well as Magikarps, a lot of Tentacools, things like that. In specific here in Gen 3, you're probably going to be seeing a good amount of Spheals, a good amount of Lotads, things like that. There's others we will see, but we're not going to see those until we reach the later water routes in this journey, which there are several of, as anyone who remembers a certain IGN review about this game can very much attest to, considering the way that got memed on. If my memory serves correctly, I believe in my first playthrough of Omega Ruby Alpha Sapphire, I was on this route a good bit for two specific reasons. One of which we're not able to tackle until we have, I think, 6 of the gym badges in total, no matter what, and the other we're not able to tackle until we're almost on the way to the 8th. So those are pretty distant future still at this point, but it's one of those things that just kind of pops to mind every now and then. I guess the best way to put it is like if you ever just sit there and go, I wonder if I'll remember this moment in some amount of years, and then you just randomly, some amount of years later, actively do remember that scene in your life and go, huh. There's no reason for me to actually remember that, but here we are. So Swimmer Austin here has another specific new Pokemon for us, and this is one you've technically been able to see for a little bit now, depending on if you actively caught a Wingull earlier on. Because Austin's second Pokemon specifically is the evolution of Wingull at level 25, Pelipper. Water flying type, so it's weak to rock and electric, but immune to ground. For as early as it evolves, Pelipper's a decently tanky flying type Pokemon with a pretty high physical defense stat, and for Gen 3 especially, a really good special attack stat to also back up its typing. With that said, there's generally water and or flying types I tend to use before I use Wingull or Pelipper, but they make for pretty good early game options. Worth noting, I do believe that Pelipper got some sort of stat boost in Gen 7 beyond, because several Pokemon got notable stat adjustments in Gen 6 and 7 specifically, I believe. Ability-wise, though, you're not looking at too much of super interest. Pelipper can have Keen Eye, which prevents any accuracy lowering. It can have Drizzle, which will summon rain in battle outright upon it entering, which can actively be pretty good if you're trying to set up some higher boosted water attacks. And its hidden ability is Rain Dish, where if there is an active rain state in battle, Pelipper will slowly recover HP as long as that ability is active. With that said, something I'm not too sure about, so future me, I want you to do a little bit of more research into this. I'm not sure how abilities that do things like that we've heard about a couple of so far compare to ways to recover HP in battle that are tied to attacks like Leech Seed or the Giga Drain type moves over in Grass type. I know you can stack a lot of those. Heck, I can remember at least one I fought later on in the game where they stack like, I think Leech Seed, Giga Drain, and one of the abilities that I think recovers HP if there's a sunlight state in battle. But even compared to the things that I've been talking about across the LP, which we'll get into, quote, way later, unquote, that's even further beyond that, and it's not even a fight we really show for reasons I'll get into when we reach post-game. So going down a lot of the water routes, especially here on the southwest of Hoenn at this point, is largely just a lot of Pokemon trainers for you, but especially once you get back to, I believe it's Route 109 south of Slateport, there's a couple of items there for you as well. Time for our next Pokemon, though. This is Barboach. Water ground type, so it's weak to grass, immune to electric. Grass normally is a 4x weakness. Barboach doesn't have a lot going on for its stats, though it does notably get some okay abilities, namely it has Oblivious by default, so it can't get infatuated. In Gen 4, Barboach gained access to Anticipation, which is a bit of an interesting ability where if a Pokemon with that is thrown out, they shudder if the Pokemon they're facing either has a move super effective against them, a one-hit KO move, or generally self-destruct or explosion. There is some interesting stuff that you can do with that in terms of just trying to feel out an opponent's moveset, but that's better for multiple rounds against the same player and things like that in my experience. It's one that for main campaign stuff really isn't that great. Their hidden ability in Gen 5 Beyond is Hydration, though, which, if there's a rain weather state active, will just cure any status ailments that Pokemon has, which is really useful. Between those abilities and Barboach's evolution, you do end up getting a really usable water ground type that I honestly do like using. It's just that if I wanted a water ground type specifically, I'd go for a very specific other Pokemon that has that subtyping. But even then, as covered previously, one of my favorite Pokemon of all time is a water type that I tend to use on a lot of teams if it's available in a given generation. So a lot of the water types that are really good end up falling by the wayside because I'd rather just use that one. To the point where I actively have done playthroughs of some generations where I'm like, nah, I'm going to experiment around with the water types this time around just to see if there's something I haven't really tried out yet. Hoenn's actually one of the few cases I really can't rely on that Pokemon because while it's accessible in the game, it's accessible late enough where at that point I'd rather just focus on leveling and getting the team I already have a better moveset rather than just swapping a Pokemon out in the 11th hour effectively. So this up here is a little interesting. Welcome to C. Mauville. We had an NPC tell us about this over at Stern's Shipworks over in Slateport on our first visit to that city. This is an optional dungeon area which I actively cannot really tackle yet, as we need a later game HM to be able to fully explore it. In the original Ruby, Sapphire, Emerald, that was instead a wrecked ship that you could actively access a little more of at this point in the game, but you also still can't fully access that area until you get that later game HM. So in either version of Hoenn, it's just better to hold off on that area until relatively late in the game. Next new Pokemon, though, is a Swellow. This evolves from a Taillow at level 22. Normal flying type, so it's weak to rock, electric, and ice, but immune to ground and ghost. Swellow is a perfectly usable flying type Pokemon, especially for as early as you can get it. Really high speed, decent physical attack, and I want to say as of, I think, Gen 7, it's another one that got a buff to make it even a decent mixed attacker. Are there flying types I'd rather use instead? Largely, yeah. I tend to like flying as a subtype when it's paired with anything that's not normal, but out of the, like, Pidgey-adjacent normal flying type roles that's been around since Gen 1, Swellow is probably, if not my favorite, my second favorite to use. The only real substitute for that is probably the one from Gen 4, because that's also an incredibly usable Pokemon. And from memory after that, the one in Gen 6 is good, but I tend to not use it because I already usually have its other typing that's not flying fulfilled on my team for reasons that if you know Gen 6, you understand why immediately. And you know what? I really like the Rookie D-line in Gen 8. That's probably one of my favorite flying types they've done in the past 10 years overall. So this Ace Trainer over here also has a new Pokemon for us after he throws out his Zangoose. Specifically, after we take the Zangoose out, they're going to follow up with the evolution of Shroomish. We saw Shroomish all the way back, I think in like part 4 or 5, something like that. At level 23, it evolves into Breloom. Grass fighting type, so it's weak to Flying, Poison, Fire, Psychic, Ice, and Fairy, Flying being a 4 times weakness. Breloom can bring the pain as it has a nuts physical attack stat for as early as you can find it, and especially compared to how kind of underwhelming Shroomish overall is. And not for nothing, it can decently take a physical hit as well. Partner that with abilities like Effect Spore, meaning random status ailments upon taking contact damage from an opponent, Poison Heal, which inflicts poison to be a healing status instead of a damaging one, or especially Technician, which boosts the powers of move under 60 base power. You can get a really good physical attacker out of this for as really early as you can find Shroomish. I've used them before and been completely satisfied. It's just that grass is a type I tend to not use too much to begin with. Notably though, after that battle, Kenny hit level 35, and thus it's time for him to evolve from being a Trapinch into a Vibrava. In doing so, we actively gain a subtype. Notably, Vibrava is a ground dragon type, meaning it is weak to Ice, Dragon, and Fairy, and immune to ground and electric. Notably, the Ice type weakness is a 4 times weakness. Worth noting, the ground immunity in specific is because no matter what ability your Trapinch actively has, Vibrava only has Levitate, so it just can't be hit by ground attacks, which can make for a pretty good combo if you have other Pokemon that might, say, have Earthquake or something like that. So while most evolutions, you just universally gain stats, Trapinch into Vibrava, you actually lose a couple. Most notably, Trapinch's physical attack stat is base 100, Vibrava's is base 70. But the reason for that is that Trapinch's base speed goes from being 10 to Vibrava's base 70. So you gain a lot of speed in that deal, and the other points in your attack ultimately end up being, I think, thrown into all your other stats to begin with at that point. It's a bit of an interesting middle stage evolution, but trust me, it is completely worth it by the time you reach the final evolution at a later level. Welcome to Route 109, though. Like I mentioned, there's a surprising amount of Pokemon trainers here, and also a lot of items just hidden on these little islands. Actively going from one of these to the other can be a little tedious at some point, because you just have to watch the surf animation over and over again. I think that was one thing they actively just made a little better in the later games, especially, I think Gen 7 made a pretty good change for this, where starting in that generation, the functionality that HMs largely had on the field was instead given to very specific other abilities you just always have access to that have much faster animations, if any at all. In fact, some of them even auto-activate in certain later games, namely Legends Arceus and Scarlet Violet. Which, by the way, last night ended up booting Scarlet on my Switch too, because I got one of those, and seeing that game run well is scary. Like, this is a genuinely so different feeling game now that I feel like I need to replay the entire thing again. Didn't expect it to be as good as it is in that regard. I went to the areas where the frame drops were so notable that I felt like I was playing an N64 game, and it was running at a consistent like 55 to 60, and it felt alien. With that said, time for our next new Pokemon. This is Magcargo. This evolves from Slugma at level 38. Fire rock type, so it is weak to fighting, ground, rock, and water. Notably, ground and water are 4 times weaknesses. Magcargo has a lot of physical defense and some decent special stats to back it up. But with how common water types are, I don't like the 4 times weakness to water in that regard. With that said, ability-wise, you could have Magma Armor, Flame Body, or Weak Armor. Magma Armor we've talked about before. I believe that just prevents you from being frozen as a status ailment. Flame Body burns foes on contact or also helps hatch eggs faster. Meanwhile, Weak Armor, I believe we talked about that with Skarmory. For every physical attack you take, your defense lowers, but your speed raises. Which is a very specifically good boot for Magcargo, specifically because the speed is the lowest stat that Pokemon has, and any boost it can get to that outside of Trick Room strategies can be really useful. With that out of the way, since I was near Slateport, I figured I might as well come back here to the Trick House and take care of our next little Trick House puzzle, which is probably the least puzzling of the puzzles to me outside of one very specific step I looked over very heavily on my first playthrough, and almost did on this playthrough. This Trick House instance is a pretty direct maze compared to the prior ones where you had to use an HM more accurately. You can use a TM here in that it's a dark area, so if you have flash on a Pokemon, you can lighten it up a good bit. But even compared to like the caves in the dark, here in Gen 6 especially, you can really just see and feel your way out around here pretty easily. There are some areas that have little roofs, as we can see on the right side of the screen. When you're in those areas, you just have to feel your way around physically. But the trick is, the scroll we need to get is on the far right side of the room. But no active pathway beneath any of these roofed areas or otherwise actively leads there. There's a secret staircase hidden you need to find, and it's more of a trick of the camera than anything. Yeah, though, in that regard, Flash is also just a less useful TM once the series went 3D especially, because in the early games it was completely dark in an area if you didn't have Flash. Later games just added a little area of sight around you. I think especially the original Gen 3 added that, so you can see what's directly around you but not further than like 4 or 5 tiles away. But since we're in 3D now and it's actively lit, you can see pretty clearly what's around you even in the dark. It's just a matter of certain details are pretty hard to spot. Yeah, though, behind that wall is a hidden staircase that takes you all the way down to where the Pokeball is, as well as the secret scroll to get the password for this specific Trick House room. Notably, the items we're getting here, the Lumio Skeletts, are just the Kalos version of the Lava Cookies and all those other things. Using those on a Pokemon in or out of battle will heal pretty much all status ailments. At least ones that are not directly like Faint or KO, things like that. Now, largely, the Trick House has just been kind of fun, but if you like doing specific things in post-game, this is a very important area to do. Ah, you made it this far? You're sharp. Took me all night to board up the windows to make the room dark. You're almost my equal in greatness by 2 places. Great, you've earned this reward. And here we get the almighty Trick Room. This is one of the best moves in the game, especially if you like using Pokemon that are generally slow. The way that Trick Room works is that it completely inverts how the speed stat is used in battle. Mostly. The thing is, priority brackets still actively get involved here. So say a quick attack will still go before a tackle no matter how much slower the person using tackle is. But using 2 priority +1 moves, the Pokemon at the lower speed will go first. There are several Pokemon I can think of off the top of my head that are really good except for their low speed, and Trick Room goes a long way to make them much more useful. I'm still largely a big Unga Bunga, I'll mostly only use damaging moves type player, but Trick Room's a move that's good to have around, especially in post-game or competitive type situations. Even just friendly competitive, really. With that said, welcome to Route 118. We've actively been able to access this route since our first trip to Mauville several parts ago. But the main reason I didn't is because you could get all of about 15 feet in this route before you reach a water body that we need Surf to surpass. So you actively can't reach the east coast of Hoenn until you actively go beat your dad up. With that said, there are 2 other specific things we're going to be focusing on in this route before we actively move on to our next main route. With that said, there's also a surprising amount of Pokemon trainers over here, and honestly, if you're having trouble with especially Watson, potentially coming over here to fight them for extra EXP can probably go a good distance. Our first duty is to talk to this fisherman. Huh, a good rod's really good. Wouldn't you agree? Sure. We're of identical minds. Huh, take this good rod. So now we have the good rod, which means we now have access to a much greater variety of water-based Pokemon you can find through fishing. And in specific, there's a Pokemon I want to catch on this route that you can catch using the good rod or above. Although here in Gen 6, it is an exceedingly rare Pokemon to find with the good rod specifically. It's only a 5% encounter rate here in Gen 6, whereas in Gen 3 it was a 20% chance with the good rod. So I do end up cutting to the point where the Pokemon actively shows up. I'm here for the Pokemon that's finally going to replace Magna in our party as a stopgap water type. I'm here for a Carvanha. I already talked about Carvanha and Sharpedo earlier in the LP and how much I do think it's a really solid water type. Good physical attack, good speed. It's just kind of weak on the defenses. But for a fast hitter, hey, I'll take it. Notably, my overall favorite water type Pokemon is accessible in the game, but again, I would have to wait so long to get it that Magna would effectively not be a stopgap at that point, and I'd rather have a finalized water type in my team before the next gym, just as a thing of like, okay, comfortability's sake and all that. Carvanha, the savage Pokemon. If anything invades Carvanha's territory, it'll swarm and tear at the intruder with its pointed fangs. On its own, however, this Pokemon suddenly turns timid. And why not? Let's go name this one after my IRL brother. This is Chris. Now, I probably could just head back to Mauville and grab Chris immediately, but instead I'm just going to wait until the next PC shows up, which is in the relatively near future anyway, so it's not that big of a deal. But hey, look who we've once again found. It's time for our TV reporter duo, and this time they've upgraded because this is our second fight against them. They've evolved their Pokemon a stage. The Magnemite's now Magneton, and the Whismur is now a Loudred. It evolves from Whismur at level 20. Pure Normal type, so it's weak to fighting, immune to Ghost. Loudred's got some pretty alright HP and mixed attack stats, but the big thing is that outside of the soundproof ability, it also gains access to Scrappy as a hidden ability. And Scrappy is very fun because it actively allows Pokemon with that ability to deal damage to Ghost-type Pokemon with normal and fighting-type moves, which they're otherwise immune to. So if you end up actively catching or breeding a Whismur that has Scrappy, that can go a long way to potentially upset some Ghost-type Pokemon in the case you know some are coming up, or if you know friends that you want to battle with that actively use Ghost-types pretty regularly. It makes for a very funny moment in my experience. Now, I don't know why this is the way it is in my memory, but for some reason as a little kid, I remember thinking that the evolution that exists beyond Loudred, where the real strength of this Pokemon line comes into play, wasn't a thing in the original Gen 3, but it always was? I guess maybe I kind of thought it was another thing they just added into Gen 4 for some reason, probably because I just didn't see many of them in the main campaign of Hoenn, but shrugs. Play one shot. Do you remember? That's the quote you gave us as a battle clincher last time. I never ever forget stuff like this. Hey man, what do you think? Do you want to be interviewed again? Sure. You will? Thank you. Okay, I need you to describe your feelings about our battle, but it has to be short and sweet. Go! That should be fine. We'll be keeping an eye out for you. I believe we have one more place we can actively encounter them pretty freely later in the game, so we'll keep an eye out for them for that point. But now it's time for one of the more hit or miss moments for Omega Ruby Alpha Sapphire, and if you've played the game before, you know what I mean about that. Oh, hello, Steven. Been a little bit. Why, hello. We met in Granite Cave, didn't we? No, I remember it. It's Kyle, right? It's good to see that your journey is going well. You know, Kyle, in this vast world, there are many kinds of Pokémon. They come in many types. Should you raise different types, or will you only raise Pokémon of a certain type you like? I wonder what you think as a Pokémon trainer. Not that it's anything I should be concerning myself with, but somehow I find myself wanting to know what you think. I suppose I should be going. I hope to see you again, though. Latios! Do you want us to soar somewhere with you? Kyle, come with me. Latios. I believe that it sought us out for help. If that's the case, let's go. We've arrived. Thank you, Latios. I don't know what it is. Not quite unease, not quite fear, but there is something unsettling. It is an odd feeling, as though I'm walking in a dream or an illusion. I once heard an odd fable. It was said that the two Pokemon that live on this island guard some secret about that great form of evolution. Mega evolution. Could it be that some dangerous element is here because of that? Come, we should be going. Now, this is going to be very unfamiliar to people who never actively played Omega Ruby Alpha Sapphire, as this was entirely added for it. This entire little section here was not in Gen 3. Those whose memory seek to carve them their hearts. Those whose memories fade seek to carve them in their hearts. Worth noting, that quote is actively just taken right out of the event with the Eon ticket in the original Generation 3 tied to the Latis here. Because we saw Latios. Here's Latios. Latios. It's beautiful. If I were to describe such beauty in terms of a stone, it would be a sunstone. No, it goes beyond that. Isn't its brilliance like that of a dawnstone? It's as fantastic as a steel-type Pokémon. Team Aqua, is it? So Latios noticed they're coming, and that's why it called on us. Huh? What's this? You?
Huh? Mr. Matt, sir! That pipsqueak over there is the kid that I heard keeps getting in our way. But that rather alluring gentleman with him... I feel like I should know him from somewhere. Maybe he's a contest star?
Oh, I have no time to worry about that. The name's Matt. That's Team Aqua Admin Matt to you. What I want from you is that Latios behind you there. But that Mega Stone... We of Team Aqua are definitely gonna need the transcendent power of Mega Evolution to achieve our ambitions. How about it? If you get out of our way, we won't rough you up. I'm not moving. That's right. Full points for the correct answer. I'll take part in this battle as well. Let's protect Latios from these beasts together. We cannot allow Latios or even a Megastone to fall into the hands of such villains. Oh! If you're really that stupid, then I have no choice but to squash you. Time for our next Team Aqua admin fight against a map, and it's also multi-battle, so we have Steven fighting alongside us. Matt only has one Pokemon himself, a Sharpedo with Rough Skin for its ability, Swagger, Scary Face, Ice Fang, and Slash, while the Team Aqua Grunt has Grimer with Stench for its ability, Mud Bomb, Minimize, Fling, and Sludge Bomb. This is a very easy fight. Matt is the much easier to deal with Team Aqua admin compared to Shelly, because Shelly always has at least 2 Pokemon. Worth noting though, Steven did send out a new Pokemon, but because we're not actively fighting it, I don't really feel right in actively going over its stats. But I guess depending on what you're trying to get done, worth noting that the Sludge Bomb attack, for instance, that Grimer has will do no damage to the Metang because of its Steel typing. But the Dark move in Fling might do more damage because of the Psychic subtyping that Metang actively has. Again, more on that later. Since this is entirely new, though, it's worth noting that Omega Ruby Alpha Sapphire, outside of the battle system changes from Gen 3 to Gen 6 and the occasional Pokemon from Gens 4, 5, or 6 you can find pretty early on in some form or manner, any changes to the story they added here are largely backloaded outside of the fast travel points with like May or Wally and all that jazz we've seen up to this point already.
Your strength is no joke. That made me dizzy.
Oh! That's a loss I can be proud of. Oh, strong, ain't ya? You're an interesting punk too, I'll give you that. I love interesting, strong dudes. That's why I love my bro Archie. And that's why I'm gonna start loving you from now on, too. Next time I see you, I'll smash you up real good, okay? Let's get out of here, you dull grunt.
Yes, sir.
Good work, Kyle.
Ah, that's right. We should first heal up the Pokemon that fought on our behalf, shouldn't we?
You performed spectacularly. We were able to protect both this wondrous Pokemon and its Megastone, thanks to you. And it looks as though Latias may have also recognized you as a trainer worthy of its trust. Look, it's trying to offer you its allegiance. I believe it is trying to show that it wants to go with you on your journey. Go on, hold out your hand to it. Free Legendary! Depending on the version of the game you're playing, you get one of the two Latis here. You get Latias here in Alpha Sapphire, and Latios over in Omega Ruby. Effectively, you get the opposite color. And you're actively forced to take it with you until the next PC, which I've never really understood the reason for. I'm not going to give it a nickname, though, because I'm never going to use it. But we also get the Latias or Latios site, so you also get access to the Mega Evolution. You should take this from me. Kyle obtained the Mega Bracelet. Finally, almost 6 gym badges in, we actively gain access to what's the main gimmick of Gen 6 on the whole. With the Mega Bracelet that I just gave you, and the Mega Stones that a Pokemon may hold, your Pokemon will be able to achieve a powerful boost, quite unlike any usual form of evolution. But only if you are bound by great affection. You'll be able to achieve Mega Evolution. I suggest that you try it with Latias the next time that you happen to have the chance in battle. Mega Evolution is a phenomenon that has long been shrouded in mystery. What is a Megastone? What is a Keystone? The process by which bonds between Pokemon and people manifest in tangible power. How do we explain that? I hope that the Mega Bracelet I just gave you might bring us one step closer to finding the answer to these questions. If that settles that, should we be heading back? Together with Latios waiting so patiently for us there. Thank you for your help, Kyle. Perhaps it's trying to tell you to take good care of Latias? In the end, you were a far greater help than I expected you to be. I expect that you and your team will be able to best both Route 119 ahead and even Fortree Gym beyond that. I'll be curious to see how much stronger you might grow by the next time we meet. Until then, Kyle. Also, sorry for the minor audio crackling here. That was on the recording side, and I couldn't do anything about it, because at this point I was close to 2 hours into this recording session, if memory serves. So let's quickly talk about the Latis themselves. They are both Dragon Psychic type, meaning they are weak to Bug, Ghost, Ice, Dragon, Dark, and Fairy, but immune to Ground because of their Levitate ability. Latias is more minded on the special defense side, but it has pretty good special attack and speed to back that up. Meanwhile, Latios is more specially attack-minded, but its special defense and speed aren't anything to be laughed at either. With that said, now that we have the Mega Bracelet, any of the Mega Stones we found throughout the game thus far, like the Alakazite back at Slateport, Market, and all that, you can now actively use as long as you have the Pokemon in question. You can only use one per battle, but they can be game changers, and in some cases are just outright disgustingly broken, as the meta is very aware of. While I largely cut out battles that are redundant because they have no new Pokemon or aren't related to the story, I am going to showcase one of the next two bird tamers here, just to showcase how Mega Evolution actively works. In specific, for one thing, the Pokemon needs to be holding their Mega Stone in question. Whether or not you find them in the map, do certain side quests to get them, or just get them through story depends on the Mega Stone, though. Upon doing so, they need to be actively out in battle, and you'll then notice a Mega Evolve button on the bottom screen, right about where the run button is in battle right now. Tap that, select your move, and the Mega Evolution will go off upon the active combat starting. With that said, in case you have multiple Pokemon holding Mega Stones in your party, make sure you decide to actively save the Mega Evolution for when it might be more useful, or whichever one is more powerful in the moment. upon Mega Evolving, the Pokemon's shape completely changes. Most of the time they actively get a new ability, and their stats are also boosted to a usually pretty ridiculous degree. Latios and Latios, though, don't actively gain a new ability in their Mega Evolution. It's just a stat boost for them. In specific with Latios here, they gain 20 attack, 30 defense, 20 special attack, and 20 special defense. So largely, Megas are just outright stronger. With that said, I won't lie, I don't tend to use Megas too much in this LP during the main story, if only because most of the battles I'm high enough level because of this game's off-level curve due to how much experience you get compared to the original Gen 3, where there's just not much of a point to me using them in a lot of cases. But they are just universally really powerful. Latios, by the way, in comparison, when it Mega Evolves, gains 40 physical attack, 20 defense, 30 special attack, and 10 special defense, I believe, looking at these numbers correctly. I appreciate them making the Latis a story pickup in one regard, because in the original Gen 3, they were roaming legendaries, which if you've watched my Fire Red Let's Play or my Soul Silver Let's Play, you know, I just actively dislike dealing with it, even using the shortcuts to get around it pretty easily. But I understand certain people who think them just giving you a legendary like this is a little bit powerful for the game's level curve, and they are right about that as well. I have one specific friend, hey Prof, how you doing, who really disliked this, and I think he actively ended up putting the game down due to it. Prof, if you're listening, correct me in the comments if I'm wrong about that. I myself do not use legendaries in my LPs or personal playthroughs unless I'm otherwise forced to by the narrative in some form. So once I actually get access to the next PC, I'm just going to be storing Latias away, as I don't really have a use for them in my personal setup. But also, in the case you like using legendaries but don't like that you just get one for free like that, you could also just not use it. It's something I've done several times, but also how you judge that depends on the kind of person you are, how you like to build yourself and all that. In a regard, it is kind of like just not using all the tools in the toolbox you're given, which I guess in some regards can be considered a challenge run, but I just consider it playing the game with the standard tools rather than the power tool, if that makes sense. But with that, I'm going to need to end this off here. Thank you guys for watching, and in part 15, we're heading on up towards Route 119 and seeing what we got along that path. See you guys then.